Good morning, everyone. The May 26, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council is now in session. Warden Liz Danielson presiding.
Good morning, everyone, on this rainy Wednesday morning. Could I have a roll call, please?
Warden Danielson,
Here.
Councillor Moffat,
Present.
Councillor Roberts,
Here.
Councillor Kennedy,
Present.
Councillor Burton,
Here.
Councillor Ryle,
Present.
Councillor DeVolen,
Here.
and Councillor Shell.
Present.
Is there any notice of pecuniary interest or a general nature thereof this morning? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of April 28th and a special meeting, same day? Councillor Shell, Councillor DeVolen.
Did we miss the motion to approve the agenda, Warden?
Well, yes, we did. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda for today? Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the May 26, 2021 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. So you have a mover and a seconder for the minutes.
I missed that. I missed who. I apologize.
Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Shell, I believe.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that the minutes from the April 28, 2021 regular meeting and the April 28, 2021 special meeting of Haliburton County Council be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have no business arising from previous meeting, so we'll move into our delegations, and first we'll hear about celebrating our sports history in Haliburton County. So we have Scotty LaRue and Roger Troll to talk about the Haliburton Highlands Sports Hall of Fame. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good.
You're on mute.
My secretary here didn't catch that. Good morning, Warden Danielson and mayors and deputy mayors of the county. Roger Troll, my friend, is and a member of the committee of the Haliburton Highlands Sports Hall of Fame, are here to bring you up to date on the progression of our organization. First of all, we're a member of the Haliburton County Community Cooperative, which has some benefits for us, and we are happy to belong to that organization as well. I'm just going to give you briefly an idea of how this has been progressing. We've actually been working on this project for 3 years, and it's a fair amount of organization, and we are hoping to have our
first inauguration, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think. I would say we're going to have our first inauguration on October the 23rd, and it'll be a gala meeting. We're hoping for a large crowd, and we have already picked our induction people that are going into the Hall of Fame in the inaugurated season. We can probably give you an idea of how these people and how people are inducted and nominated to be into the Hall of Fame.
Could we go to the next slide?
Reading from this, it's the Sports Hall of Fame. The idea has been discussed in the community for a number of years. Recognition that sports in Haliburton County is a significant part of living here. Many Haliburton County individuals and teams have attained prominence and distinction in a number of sports. The community wants to be able to highlight these people and teams.
Next slide, please.
An initial board of directors was struck in 2019 to make a Haliburton County Sports Hall of Fame a reality. I was chosen as the first chair of the board. I'm Scott LaRue. Lots of research into the rich history of sports in the Highlands was led by former high school teacher Paul Morissette. A constitution was created, and the nomination and selection criteria was developed.
Next slide, please.
The municipality of Dysart has generously provided the stage area of the A.J. LaRue Community Center as the first home for the Hall of Fame. Excuse me. The Hall of Fame joined the Haliburton County Community Cooperative in 2020. An initial budget was developed and our first corporate sponsors came on board. And we are welcoming a very special thanks to Curry Chevrolet and Minden Subaru.
Next slide, please.
We received a local grant through the HCDC. Now that includes the cost for the website, stairs and railing at the display space, and plaques, posters, plexiglass. And we are also planning on some special events for the initial ceremony of the inductees. An initial display design was completed for our website, and it'll be coming on board shortly. I mentioned before, the first induction gala tentatively scheduled for October the 23rd of this year.
Next slide, please.
The next steps that we are attaining or trying to attain are to expand the membership of the board of directors to reflect the makeup of our community. We got to start and complete the auditorium renovations, create the showcase display cases for inductees, and immediate launch of a website, formal announcement of initial inductees. We are starting an immediate launch on
June the 7th is when the public announcement will be made of the initial group of inductees, our inaugural group, and we're excited about that. So look for that announcement on the 7th of June, week Monday.
And thanks to the municipality of Dysart for being able to provide charitable donation receipts for donations. We have been working on some fundraising to cover some of these expenses that we are planning to come up with from now until the inauguration gala.
Okay, next slide, please.
Now, the Sports Hall of Fame is divided into three categories for inductees. The first one is the individual. To be considered for admission to the Hall of Fame, athletes must have been a resident of Haliburton County for a minimum of 5 years before or during their sporting accomplishments. An individual connected with any sport who has attained significant recognition and or fame in or for the Haliburton Highlands over a period of 5 years or more is eligible. An athlete must have been retired from active participation in the sport or sports for which they are nominated for a period of at least 3 years, or still active, have attained the age of 40.
Next slide, please.
A builder shall include individuals who have made a major contribution to the development and advancement of sports in the Haliburton Highlands, or who have brought honor to the Haliburton Highlands. Builders shall be eligible at any time. There shall be no waiting period for this category, even though the nominee may still be active in the roles for which they are nominated. To be considered for a builder, an admission to the Hall of Fame as a builder, an individual shall have worked in the sport or sports over a period of 10 years or more, and shall have been considered outstanding, whether this be in the organization of leagues and facilities, keeping a team or league active, or having a high degree of success in coaching or managing teams of individual athletes. Examples include, but are not limited to, league or team officials or referees, umpires, sponsors, executives, and trainers.
Okay, next slide, please.
The third category is teams. The team shall include any team based in Haliburton County or any municipality within Haliburton County. Minor sports teams, high school teams, junior sports teams, and adult sports teams are competing at any level are eligible for admission to the Hall of Fame. To be considered for admission to the Hall of Fame as a team, the team shall have achieved a high degree of success at the local, district, and provincial level. Team success at the regional and particularly at the provincial levels are notable. However, teams which have had a long period of success over many years at the local level should also be considered. Teams shall be eligible at any time. There shall be no waiting period for teams.
Next slide, please. Maybe I'll just add a couple of things before we take questions. This being our inaugural year, the selection process was different than it will be in the future. This year we did a lot of research, as Scott mentioned earlier. Paul Morissette led that effort, and as a group we developed a list of individuals, athletes, builders, and teams that we felt deserved the permanent recognition that they'll receive. And then we created a community council that reviewed the individuals that we were thinking about bringing forward, and we came up with a final list. And Scotty and I have had the great pleasure of calling these people in recent days, and I can tell you for sure that they're honored and excited to be being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And as a group, we spent a lot of time ensuring that those individuals that are going to be inducted are representative of the community, representative of a variety of sports. We really worked hard to make sure this wasn't a hockey Hall of Fame, but was in fact a sports Hall of Fame. And that the inductees will be representative of multi-sports and all areas of the county. And we believe that on June 7th, when the announcement is made, that you'll be pleased with our choices, and we'll all be proud of those folks who are going to receive this permanent recognition. We're happy to take any questions, Madam Warden.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This really is an excellent initiative, and we do have a long history of rich history in sports in Haliburton. It's really good to see the work that you're doing. Questions, Councillor DeVolen?
Not a question, but comments. The great body of work, as the warden has said. I would say as the natural environment, the cultural activities we have, sport in Haliburton County has been part of our identity for over 100 years. And certainly your organization, to track the history of it, acknowledge those that have played important roles in the past, current, and into the future is to be applauded. And a couple of questions. I mean, looking down the road, thank you to Councillors Robert and Kennedy and Dysart for giving you your first home. Is there bigger, longer term plans that indeed, as this grows in scale and interest, that it may have a standalone home of its own?
Yes, that's Brent, that's a good question. And yes, we have intentions of in the future of moving out of the old facility. There are rumors floating about that there may be a recreation new complex coming up soon, and we hope to be included in that and have our own special room so that the display will be in a better location.
The other thing I might add is that the Haliburton, we expect that through this process we'll receive some memorabilia from both inductees and their families, and we're really pleased that the Haliburton Museum has agreed to archive all that material for us. So we won't need the physical space for that, where the displays are located, but we'll have easy access to it, which is great.
We
Any other-
commend the Dysart Council, Mayor Roberts and Deputy Mayor Pat Kennedy for being so supportive of our project and basically helping us redecorate and renovate, so it's going to be a decent looking display area. Thank you.
Councillor Ryall and then Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, just, it's awesome. You guys are doing something. Thank you. That's as much as I can say about that. Will there be an historical side to it? In other words, in addition to the Hall of Fame itself, will people be able to donate, say, for instance, older golf clubs or something that would add to the ambiance and the overall, entertainment, knowledge, experience of being there?
Yes, certainly. I guess you call that memorabilia, but we have visited other halls of fame in different areas, and one that we like to bring out is the Hall of Fame in Penetang machine, and they were able to get a grant from the government when they added to their arena. They have their own special room and glass cases and lots of memorabilia, and they have in the basement. They actually have a storage facility for it, and every 2 years, they change their whole display area, taking out the memorabilia that has been displayed for that period of time and replaced with things they have in the basement. It's an amazing situation, and it works really well for them. That would be an ideal thing for us to be able to have happen in the future.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. We had the pleasure of your presentation yesterday, but I just, we're at Dysart, we're very happy to be your first temporary home. And that's why we were able to do the receipts. And that was thanks to Councillor Kennedy, who checked with our treasurer. The facility is under our care and control in our building. But we also did give you some financial money too. So $2,500. So, to kickstart that, because you needed to be able to build these display cases, etc. So I'm really excited to see when that facility will be actually open. Lastly, I just wondered if you wanted to also give a sort of name the who's who on your board, because you really have quite an amazing group of people that have been committed to this project for well over 3 years. Just wonder if you want to name who else is on your board.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. Yes, we have a great bunch of people, not a bunch of people, but some very interesting people, and who are very interested in sports. First of all is Roger Troll, a former vice president of McMaster University. He's retired and living in Haliburton. He has been a summer resident for his lifetime pretty well, and he's retired up here. We have Paul Morissette, who is a retired teacher, and Paul is very interested in the history part of this project, and he's done a fantastic job of putting a binder together with all the nominees and their history, and when you read it, it's just outstanding, and he continues to work on the history part of it. We have Jim Bradley, who was a former secretary of the high school, the Board of Education, and he's retired in Haliburton. We have, who else do we have? We have Kelly Mitchell, Kelly is a lobbyist, and he has a company that lobbies the government for people like ourselves. And Kelly's very knowledgeable. He's grown up and played hockey and was a good hockey player for Haliburton. We also have Roger's wife, Janet Troll, and Janet is a writer. She's a painter, and she's a jack of all trades, and she's a wonderful person. And we're glad to have Janet on board with us, and she'll be doing some of the writing on the plaques and everything that we're going to display with the inductees.
And of course, Pat Kennedy, we couldn't have done this without Pat's help. Thank you, Pat.
Pat works very hard. I know he's busy with the council, and he never refuses to help us if we require it. So we really appreciate your help, Pat, as well.
One of the things we said early on in the presentation was that one of our goals, one of our top goals after the announcement of the inductees, is to expand our board and to be, to have a board that's more diverse than it currently is, and to work toward the future. Every 2 years, we will have a public call for nominations to the Hall of Fame. We thought it was important for us to get it started with a large number. We're actually going to have 11 athletes, 3 builders, and 3 teams inducted the first time around. But in the future, we'll rely on individuals being nominated through our website and in other ways. And every 2 years, we'll go through the nomination process. We did also create an external nominating committee that reflects the county and is more diverse than perhaps our board is. So that's one of our goals.
Yeah. Yes, it's unfortunate we haven't got many people outside of Dysart, and that's something we want to correct. We have advertised that we would like people from all over the county, and it was articles in the paper 3 years ago, and we didn't get much response. So we are hoping that maybe now that once we get on board, that other people will be interested in joining our committee.
Are there any other questions for these gentlemen? Well, I'm sure that we all really look forward to following your successes. Something that I'm sometimes hesitant to ask when we have delegations. Is there anything that Haliburton County can do for you or help you with?
Well, one of the things we would love you to do is to mark October 23rd in your calendars and plan to attend the initial induction ceremony, which we hope will take place at the Pinestone Inn and Conference Center. Other than that, I don't think so.
Well, that's a nice ask. That's one of the best asks we've had in a long time.
We will absolutely let you know if there's something you can do for us in the future.
Okay, thanks. So I wonder if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Councillor DeVolin, Councillor Roberts, thank you.
Moved by Councillor DeVolin, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the delegation from Mr. Scotty LaRue and Mr. Roger Trull on behalf of the Haliburton Highlands Sports Hall of Fame Committee.
And we thank you. We thank you. I just want to say we thank you for allowing us to give you this information today.
Well, we were pleased to hear it, and we thank you for your efforts. That's for sure.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion? That's carried. Okay, next on the agenda is the review of our financial statements and the year-end audit. And we have Oscar Poloni here from KPMG to present.
Good morning, Warden Danielson, members of County Council. Thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to be here today to present the financial statements for the County of Haliburton for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Consistent with what we've done in the past, we've provided a brief presentation really intended to summarize our audit findings as well as the financial statements and highlight some of the key points from a year-over-year perspective, and just to walk County Council through the statements, hopefully to help to address any questions you may have. So next slide, please. So the financial statements that are included in the package include KPMG's proposed audit opinion, and we are prepared to issue what we call an unqualified or a clean audit opinion on the county's financial statements. This is the highest level of assurance that you can receive under Canadian auditing standards. So for lack of a better term, it really doesn't get better than this. What you will note from reading the auditor's report is that we don't say your financial statements are accurate, because that would require us to test every transaction. Rather, what we say is that they're fairly presented in all material respects. And materiality is the level of errors, if you will, that we can absorb before we require your staff to either change and correct the errors or change our opinion. It's generally calculated as a percentage of your prior year's revenues. So for this year, your materiality is about $720,000. Now, materiality influences and determines a number of aspects in our audit approach. For example, it's used to determine sample sizes. But the other thing that it does is it determines our posting threshold. And this is the level above which, if we have an error that's uncorrected, we are required to communicate it to County Council as part of our year-end reporting. That is calculated at 5% of materiality, or $36,000. So basically, if we find anything over $36,000 that's wrong, we would bring it to County Council. You'll also notice the financial statements are draft. We are required to keep financial statements draft until such time as they are actually approved by the county. So following this meeting, and assuming that the financial statements are approved, we'll take the draft stamp off, we'll put our signature on, and the audit will be completed for another year. So next slide, please. So the first financial statement is the statement of financial position, and this is a summary of your assets, your liabilities, and your surpluses at year end. And just to highlight some of the more significant changes on a year-over-year basis, you can see that your cash balances have gone up by roughly $3 million. So $3.4 million last year compared to just under $6.5 million this year. The biggest contributor to this change was the fact that there was some capital funding that was received during 2020 that hadn't been spent at year end. And so those funds were hitting your bank account and were accumulated in your bank account at year end. Once you move through your capital program for 2021, obviously you'll spend these funds on capital investments. Just to maybe, if you could go to the next slide, please. On your financial statements, in addition to your cash, there's also an account caption relating to your investments. And these are investments that aren't necessarily needed where the cash is needed for day-to-day investments. So you've locked them up in investments. And on this slide, we've tried to give council a bit of perspective as to what your investments are and how they're performing. What you could see is that for the most part, and I want to caution, I am not an investment advisor by any stretch of the imagination, but when I look at this, what I see is there's a heavy weighting towards what we would consider to be relatively safer investments. So a savings account, money market portfolio, and corporate bonds generally have less risk associated with them than equity. And so you can see that those three categories account for about 80% of your investments. Now, under the rules that municipalities report under, the public sector accounting standard rules, you're actually required to carry your investments at fair market value, not at cost. And so what you can see from your financial statements is your investments are carried at a balance of just over $2.5 million. Historically, the cost of those investments is actually 2.47. So your investment valuations are higher than your historical cost. And once again, I'm not an investment advisor, but I would suggest that's a much better position to be in than the opposite. In terms of your returns, in the last year in 2020, there was a total of $84,000 of investment income realized across the different portfolios. And since inception, the municipality has generated $144,000 of investment income associated with it. And once again, council, what I would suggest, my experience with municipalities is generally there's always a balance between the rate of return that you're looking to receive versus the risk that you're willing to absorb. As a public sector organization that's funded with municipal tax dollars, what municipalities often do is they adopt less risky investment portfolios because you're using taxpayer funds. And what I would suggest is what we've seen with the county is very much consistent with what we would consider to be best or common practice with municipalities in terms of your investment advice. So if we could go back to the previous slide, please. So from a liabilities perspective, you can see that your accounts payable and accrued liabilities have increased by roughly $1 million. So these are expenses that you incur prior to year end and pay after year end. There's a number of different factors that will drive this number up or down. During the year at December 31st, 2020, there was an increase in the amount of construction holdbacks payable at year end. So when you undertake a capital project for roads, for example, there's generally a 10% holdback from the construction perspective to ensure that any deficiencies are addressed. And there's also holdbacks related to the maintenance to make sure that assets maintained. So holdbacks this year are about $426,000 higher than last year. In addition, there's a new payable this year for $160,000. There was pandemic pay funding or premium funding that was provided by the province of Ontario. And very much it was a case of you were entitled to spend it, but if you didn't spend it, the money would have to be repayable back to the province. So that amounted to $160,000. And because there wasn't a pandemic last year in December 2019, that payable didn't exist. And lastly, what you'll find is at December 31st, 2020, there were 2 quarterly billings outstanding to the City of Kawartha Lakes for health and social services. So they are technically the service manager provider to the county. Last year, there was only 1 interim billing that was outstanding. And so because of this, it would have increased the accounts payable and accrued liabilities by a further $400,000. So a lot of what you're seeing is timing. Some of it is one-time issues. From a debt perspective, you could see municipal debt sort of in the middle of the statement. Your municipal debt has gone up by roughly $2.9 million. There was about $3 million of new long-term debt that was taken out for County Roads 1, 4, and 10. And offsetting this is $121,000 in principal repayments. And just for the information of county, your new long-term debt, the interest rate on it was 1.38%. So what you're seeing is fairly low interest rates with respect to your borrowing. And I'm old enough to remember when my mortgage on my house was 13%. So just for reference, that's your interest rate. So maybe if I may, can we move through 2 slides, please? So the next, stop right there. Perfect. So in your financial statements as well, under your liabilities, there's reported deferred revenues, and this balance has gone from $111,000 to $289,000. And deferred revenue represents funds that you've received during the year where you haven't really recognized the revenue because you haven't met the recognition criteria. And so there's a couple of buckets, if you will, with respect to this. There's gas tax funding, which comes in. There's funding under the province with respect to the Safe Restart program. And then there's other pools and smaller pools of money that are deferred related to the library and the other program. So during the year, the county received $548,000 of gas tax, but you've recognized that all as income to fund capital projects. There was $287,000 that was received by the county before year end with respect to the Safe Restart program, where the province had indicated this money was actually for 2021. So because it doesn't relate to 2020, we had to defer it and carry it over into 2021. So that $287,000 will come into income this year because that's the time frame it relates to. And just for the information of county, this only shows the phase 2 component. There was phase 1 funding of $1.4 million. Because that related to 2020, you actually brought it into income for the year, which is why it wasn't showing as deferred revenue. So next slide, please. So towards the bottom of the financial statements, you can see your tangible capital assets, and this is your investment in your infrastructure. So roads, buildings, vehicles, what have you. This number has increased by just under $5 million. So increasing by $8.9 million for capital additions, which you put on your statement of financial position, and offset by roughly $4 million of amortization expense, which is how you expense that capital over the useful life as well. And on the next slide, please, there's a bit of a summary, if you will, of all of your capital additions. And I will apologize if the print is fairly small, but it's been a busy year. And what you can see is there's been significant investments that have been made with respect to your county road network and bridges. And then there's a range of other investments that have been made with respect to infrastructure, equipment, library collection materials, and vehicles as well. So if I may, if we could go back to the previous slide. So at the bottom is your accumulated surplus. And this is essentially, if I take the value of my assets, I subtract my liabilities, it's the accumulated surplus of the county, which is just over $43 million. And this is comprised of a number of different categories of funds, if you will. Of the $43.36 million, just under $37 million is the actual investment in your infrastructure. So this would be the value of your tangible capital assets net of any related debt. And so it's important to recognize that while you may have $43 million of surplus, you don't have to have $43 million of cash, because about $37 million is actually locked up in your infrastructure. You can see that there are reserves that have been established by the county. There's just over $3 million for capital, about $610,000 for social services, $2.3 million for the special reserves, and then $500,000 of the working capital reserves. So you do have a buildup of funds intended to fund both capital and operating. And the other side of these reserves very much are your cash and your investment balances. So you do have liquidity in place. You do have reserves to fund capital and operating. Oftentimes, council, we get asked what is the appropriate level of reserves, and that's very difficult to say because it depends on the municipality, depends on your infrastructure services and council's perspective. Generally speaking, though, that from a financial perspective, nobody really has enough in reserve. But that's a discussion, if council would like, we can do some analysis on as well. So maybe if we could just flip forward 2 slides, please. So the next statement is your statement of operations, and this is a summary of your revenues and your expenditures for the year. You'll notice that your total revenues have gone up from $24.4 million to $25.8 million. So that's an increase of roughly $1.4 million, or just under 6%. Number of different components associated with this as well. The requisition from local municipalities very much in line with your budget and your request for local tax dollars to fund your operations. You can see that your federal government grants have gone down by roughly $569,000. And what this relates to and why there's a difference is last year in 2019, there were 2 one-time funding programs associated with gas tax. There was $542,000 in top-up funding and $10,000 of surplus administration funds, which flowed to the county. And so those were present in 2019, not present in 2020, and that's what's causing the decrease in the federal government grants. What you can see is that your provincial grants have gone up by roughly $1.1 million. And to a large extent, what this reflects is new funding programs introduced in response to the ongoing pandemic. So we talked about the Safe Restart program. We talked about the pandemic pay premiums for land ambulance staff. These are the types of things that are driving these increases forward. From a other revenues perspective, your user fees have gone up by roughly $138,000. A big contributor to this is the fact that the municipality is charging the health system with respect to recoveries for pandemics that are being used for pandemic response. So once again, pandemic this year, no pandemic last year, you have this recovery, which is driving up part of the increase with respect to your user fees and other charges. So next slide, please. Just to give you some perspective of your grant revenue, and I wanted to break it down a little bit for the information of County Council. You can see the various components that you have, and at the bottom is your federal component, the federal gas tax, and this is a year-over-year comparison. Last year in yellow, this year in blue. You can see the gas tax is down, and once again, last year's numbers had a range of one-time programming in place that didn't repeat. In terms of other funding that you would receive, you can see that your ambulance funding is the largest single component of your provincial grants as well. And that comes in at roughly $2.9 million. The number is very consistent on a year-over-year basis. You can see towards the middle of the graph, the third item down and the fourth item down, there is the pandemic pay that we talked about, the premium for the land ambulance workers of $121,000, and the Safe Restart program of $1.4 million. So these are new funding sources this year that were introduced because of the pandemic, and they bring this number up. But offsetting that is the fact that the municipal modernization funding that the county received this year was significantly lower than the prior year. And if county council may recall, last year, there was a one-time amount with respect to modernization funding in the amount of $725,000 that didn't repeat this year. And so because of that, you can see that there was a decrease that offset these one-time pandemic funding programs. So next slide, please. With respect to your expenditures, you report based on your types of expenditures. And the first one is general government. And this is the cost of essentially running the county as a municipality and as a corporation. So these costs have gone up by about $285,000. There were higher costs for professional fees associated with the review and COVID costs as well. So incremental salary costs associated with the response to the pandemic. Offsetting this was a change in how you allocated costs to land ambulance services. So the level of recovery from land ambulance services have gone up by $104,000. So it offsets some of the increases that you see. Your transportation services covers the cost of your roads. This has gone up by about $313,000. So the biggest contributor to this is your amortization expense. As you invest more in your road network, your depreciation or amortization expense by its nature gets bigger because there's more assets than you're amortizing. So your amortization expense is actually up around $379,000. Offsetting this are some lower contracting costs of about $150,000. You can see that your health services costs have increased by about $425,000. Included in this is $337,000 of incremental costs, wages, materials, what have you, associated with the pandemic. In addition, there was a change in the allocation, as we've mentioned. So this is where the other side of the $104,000 entry lands. Now, of the increase in health services cost, it's important to remember, Council, that this has been funded. So you would have had funding out of the Safe Restart program, you would have had money out of the province of Ontario with respect to pandemic pay, and you also had the recoveries from HHS that we talked about that would fund this. So this isn't necessarily an unfunded increase. It's just, once again, the impact of the pandemic on your financial statements. And lastly, you can see that your planning and development costs have decreased by about $314,000. Last year, you made a contribution to Yearend. That wasn't present in 2020. So if you recall, last year, the number was higher because you basically made the advance to Yearend in 1 year. This year, you don't have that advance, so it would bring the numbers down. So next slide, please. One of the things that we look at from an audit perspective is we do look at your wages, particularly to make sure that they're correct, because it is a large expense for the municipality. One of the things that we look at is we look at the change in wage costs on a per employee basis. And what you can see is that your salary costs have gone up by roughly $110,000. The average wage per employee has gone up by a greater percentage. And part of the reason for that is because you do have the pandemic pay this year that wasn't present last year. So that will add pressure with respect to the land ambulance services. And the other thing is, because of the pandemic, what you've actually had is you've had less T4s issued, which means you have less employees. And those employees generally were part-time employees that would have received lower wage rates. And so what you have now is you have more of a shift towards full-time employees. When we look at your benefits as a percentage of salaries, we always calculate them as a percentage to make sure that there isn't something weird that has happened that would shift them, that may be indicative of an error. Your benefits are 28% of your salaries. As you can see, in the prior 2 years, they amounted to somewhere between 29 to 30%. So within the range, if you will, with respect to reasonableness. So next slide, please. So Warden Danielson, members of county, that's a presentation of the financial statements. Just in terms of the audit findings, our audit is complete. What we need to do is we do need to receive the management letter from your staff, which are attestations that basically say they've told us everything. There haven't been any scope limitations or the like. We do need to update for subsequent events. And the reason why is because the financial statements are technically alive until today. So we just need to confirm that nothing material has happened since we've released them to today. And my understanding is there isn't. And then once again, we need to see county approval of financial statements. I will say that there were no difficulties encountered during the course of our audit. We were able to execute our audit as planned. We weren't required to zig or zag. Also, there was good cooperation and support provided by Elaine and the team at the county. So there were no disagreements or difficulties with managements, no limitations on our review, no scope restrictions, what have you. From a audit findings perspective, just some items to highlight for county council. There were no uncorrected audit differences above our posting threshold. So no errors that we'd found that were greater than that $36,000 number. So we hadn't had to eat into our materiality at all. So when we describe this as a clean audit opinion, this is about as clean as it gets. We hadn't identified any internal control weaknesses as a result of our audit procedures. I will say, council, we don't test every internal control. We're not required to, but we test controls over procurement and payroll and revenues, and we haven't found any issues there. We've had the opportunity to document how your administrative processes have changed in response to the pandemic, obviously with the shift in people coming in, people coming out, and changes to programming. We've looked at those processes to try to get some sense as to whether there's any potential risk exposures. There's nothing that we've seen that we would suggest enhances your risk or would cause concern from county council. And lastly, the other thing is with the new funding programs that the province has put in place, we did need to make sure that the revenue recognition, the criteria were appropriately followed. So this funding was different than last year. So we did spend some time to look to make sure that you were accounting for it appropriately. And obviously there were no issues that were identified. So Warden Danielson, members of County Council, that concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank you once again for allowing us the opportunity to serve the county. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them at this time.
Well, thank you very much. It's always music to council's ears to hear their auditor say it doesn't get any better than this. Having said that, I would just see if there are any questions from council. Well, once again, I'd like to thank you and ask if I have a mover and a seconder to receive and approve these statements. Councillor Dvolan, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Dvolan, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the presentation from Oscar Poloni of KPMG regarding the 2020 audited financial statements and the draft financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2020, and further that the 2020 audited financial statements be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks again, Oscar.
Thank you very much.
Before Oscar hits leave meeting, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want him to hit leave meeting. The one thing I picked up on is you did mention about reserves, and philosophically different councillors might feel differently, different councils feel differently. I know I have different issues at Dysart, but anyway, you did say that that we could do an analysis later. Is that something that other councillors would be interested in, just sort of for the future, to see are we meeting those targets and where our reserves should be? Is that I'm asking Oscar, but I'm asking the warden to put it on the floor.
Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because when we first started hearing this, I thought, well, I've got to ask about, what our position is. Is there an appetite for a review and any recommendations being made about our reserves? Councillor Dvolan?
I think absolutely, especially during the time that we're evolving asset management. I think those two things dovetail. So I would love to see that analysis with what will be coming forward with asset management to see if we're prepared for the next 10 years.
Did I see another hand up? So is there any action required with respect to that, Mike, or will that just take place, or would you like a resolution?
I think you guys always surprise me. I think we'll bring back a subsequent report. We'll get some pricing from Oscar, and we'll bring back a report that would outline scope of work and if there are any additional costs.
Oh, that's great. Councillor Roberts?
Yes, because here I'm proposing something, and I know that work doesn't come for free. So I didn't want to propose that there is no cost to this. So that would be great. And also, I just lost my train of thought because I saw him put his hand up. It doesn't matter. Out.
Oscar?
So Warden Danielson, if I may, I'm prepared to do this for free.
Wow.
And the reason why I'm prepared to say that is normally we provide benchmarking and some additional value added services to all of our clients, including the county. And if you recall, last year there was benchmarking, there was a cybersecurity questionnaire, best practices, all of that stuff. We've intentionally held off on that, council, because we believe with all of the reviews that have been undertaken, you've probably been benchmarked to death. And the other thing is I actually wanted to have a conversation with the county council to say, what would you like to see from a value added service? So what I would propose, Warden Danielson, if you'd like, I could connect with your CAO and we can talk about what an analysis would look like and what the timing would look like. But I want to make this very clear. I will do this for free. Particularly as a value add to the county to replace the stuff we did last year. And if the members of county council would like, I'm very prepared to do this not only at the county level, but I could do this at the lower tier as well. So if you would like to see it for your own individual municipalities, and not all of you are audit clients, so be cognizant of the fact that we don't have that relationship. But if you see that there's value in this, I'm more than happy to extend it to the lower tiers as well, because the reality is financial benchmarking and reserve policy is pretty, applicable across all sorts of municipalities. So if you, Warden Danielson, for lack of a better term, if you give me my marching orders, happy to do this. And in terms of a budgetary impact, this is a value added service that KPMG is quite prepared to provide.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Moffat?
Algonquin Highlands is not a client, and I would have concerns about stepping on the toes of our contracted firm.
Well, I believe that all we can really do is commit to the work being done on behalf of the county. And, if there's interest from any of the 4 member municipalities, I'd ask that they contact Mike, and Mike and Oscar can work that out. I think that'd be great. Well, thanks again, Oscar. You're just full of good news today. So I look forward to hearing back from you on that and you working with Mike.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, ladies and gentlemen.
You too. So next we have approval of reports and recommendations from our committee of the whole meeting.
I think unless there are any questions, Warden Danielson, we could bring the staff in, but unless there are any questions, we can just move on.
Are there any questions? Okay, then could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the recommendations? Councillor Shell and Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the recommendations from the May 12th, 2021 meeting of the Haliburton County Committee of the Whole be adopted by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, nothing under joint accessibility. No, there's no planning report. We do have a couple of items under correspondence. Did anyone wish to support either of the requests for support under correspondence? Okay, hearing none. I guess we need a mover and a seconder to accept the correspondence listing. Councillor Roberts, Councillor Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that the correspondence listing for the period of April 23rd, 2021 to May 17th, 2021 be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next, we have a report on the rail trail. So I believe Robert might be joining us for that. Good morning. And Sil.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So on this nice wet day, we have a quick status update on the rail trail. The idea of this is just again, a quick update, knowing that there's going to be some meetings coming up and some more reports and information coming to council regarding the roundtable and as well as the ICIP funding that the county was successful in being awarded at the end of April. With that, I guess the only update to the report that we provided, we do have in there that we have a contract out for the initial overlay contract. Because of some additional information regarding some scheduling issues and some tender quantity items, we've decided to defer the closing of that tender while we adjust that. So we will be re-advertising and still having that tender close and constructed this year, but we just want to make sure we have everything in order to provide value for the county.
Okay, are there any questions on the report? Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, just a comment about the grant for the rail trail. Just to note, and maybe Councillor Kennedy can actually speak more to it because he's been working with the Haliburton Highlands Land Trust to create a better, larger parking area at the end of Gould's. Well, it's not really the end of Gould's Crossing, but where Gould's Crossing hits the rail trail. And I don't know if we're trying to, have better parking year round actually for that area. So I don't know if Councillor Kennedy, if you want to speak to that, just so that the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, so that the county knows what Dysert's doing, and making sure that while it's not doing anything obviously on the rail trail itself, it's doing something in the area to promote access to the rail trail.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, yeah, the Barnum Reserve has been a victim of its own success. Very, very highly utilized by the public, and there's been problems with parking and access to the trail system, mainly in the wintertime, because the hill is, you can't really drive up the hill. So the Dysart was approached by the Land Trust to look at the options to expand some parking at the bottom, right at the rail trail. We find that the county actually owns quite a bit of the property there. So our public works director has attended the site, and we will be doing some work to expand parking there this fall. So I just want to encourage, when you're looking at developments on the rail trail as far as expansion or mitigation of some issues around that area, that stay in contact with us, and I'll pass that along to Rob at our end as well. I did have a question though. I was been approached by a couple of people, adjacent landowners, about the condition of fencing. And is there a program in place where the county monitors fencing? I understand that whether it's correct or not, that is a part of the county responsibility because it is a rail trail and was former rail property. So just need some clarification on that, please.
Yes, through the warden to the councillor. Yes, that's one of our items that we deal with on a maintenance basis. As we become aware of farmers that are using it for livestock, then they request and we go and repair fences or add fences as needed. Currently, we carry about $45,000 in the budget for general maintenance of a number of items. So therefore, we don't have the amount of money to say fence the whole rail trail from north to south. So that's how we address problems. And I think currently, still might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have one request in it currently on the fencing, but there could be more. But they contact us and we go out and address as we find out those issues.
Okay, great.
Yes. So far, we have 2 landowners that we maintain fence, that we repaired fence for in the past. We've had a few inquiries, but no requests from a couple more landowners.
I think I can change that to a request.
Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting into the weeds with this question, but the granular overlay, is it going to be granite, which we find throughout the county, or limestone, which is not within the county?
It's going to be granite, yes.
Any other questions of these gentlemen? And just a comment, I hope to see that the two public works departments continue to communicate together. And thanks for bringing that up. Councillor DeVolen?
Yeah, and just to Councillor Kennedy's, that as this becomes more successful in Minden Hills, if there's the same kind of parking and congestion challenges that exist in Dysart, give us a call in Minden, whatever, that we may need future capabilities required in the southern part of the trail as well. But just kudo to them, and we're willing to similarly dig in and help out if it's required in the Minden Hills section of the trail.
Thank you. If that concludes the questions, if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Councillor Moffat, Councillor Kennedy, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the May 2021 Rail Trail Status Report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Next are reports and minutes from external boards and agencies. Anything from the health unit, Councillor Roberts?
Sorry, I had to get my mouse. You know, I'm sure everybody's staying abreast of the health unit is out there giving information every day, just about. But one thing I asked at our last board meeting last week was about second dose bookings, because when people were booking through the provincial system, for instance, at AJ LaRue Arena, and it automatically created that second booking at AJ LaRue Arena, which there will not be, just to assure everybody that the system will then contact them to let them know of where that other location will be. Also, people were getting end of day doses, so they weren't in the system that way to even get that second dose. So I'm just assured that there'll be lots of information coming out as to, because I've had people ask me like, oh, it says it's going to be, you know, August 2nd, and I just relax, you will be notified of where the location will be. And I think there was one other thing, which is it came up under our business from other board members. And I know our local Chamber of Commerce is doing this, which is having test kits, rapid test kits at their businesses, so that people are able to do see if they are COVID positive. And they were asking what to do with the garbage. After you've done a test, that is considered landfill garbage or transfer. It's not biohazard or what to do with that. So the businesses that are taking advantage through our Chamber of Commerce with these test kits, it just goes in the regular garbage. So yeah, that's kind of funny. Anyway, that's all I have, unless there's any other questions.
Any questions for Councillor Roberts? Okay, Councillor Shell, is there any updates from point in time?
Well, to be honest, I actually missed the meeting last night because I had a horrible headache, probably because of this weather change, but I did go through the agenda, of course. So there was point in time actually did like a client experience evaluation, and I found it interesting, and I thought it was something worthwhile sharing with County Council due to, being in COVID. And the survey results were that 100% of youth and 90% of caregivers were satisfied with services at point in time, even during the pandemic. 96% of caregivers reported that they are learning things that will benefit them and their child. And 100% of youth and caregivers were satisfied with the service they received during the pandemic. And caregivers indicated how the pandemic has most impacted them, and the greatest impacts for caregivers were social activities, mental health, well-being, and home life. And very interestingly, youth indicated education, mental health, well-being areas as they're most impacted. So I noticed on the CP24 yesterday, they were saying that it's very important that kids get back to school, and the minister, the minister of health, they're saying that it's time that they think that kids should go back to school. And it was just interesting to hear from the youth of our community who feel that way. And anyway, we're hoping, be nice if they could get a couple of weeks, especially those in grades 8 and 12, I think would probably benefit the most. But anyhow, that was really all. But if there are any questions, I may or may not be able to answer just because I wasn't actually in attendance.
It's good to hear that there's consideration for the kids to go back to school for a couple of weeks, if not necessarily for learning in the last couple of weeks, at least for the social benefits that they'll receive. You know, it's been a long time that they've all been without their friends and peers. Thank you for that. Under the Warden's Caucus, the Warden's Caucus did meet on the 14th. Several of the items that we discussed, of course, ongoing advocacy for the gig project. That's really at the top of our list of priorities right now, because it's just we're reaching a very key point. So we just have discussed strategies about how to encourage both levels of government to move forward, or at least give us some responses. We also met with all of the federal MPs from Eastern Ontario, seeking their support for the project, and they were very supportive. And the other primary item of business is with respect to the Ontario health teams, and are urging the province to ensure that there's municipal membership or representation on any of the health teams that are established. We bear a certain amount of responsibility and cost, and should have a voice. So you'll see that there is a letter with respect to that on the agenda. And I think that's about it for Warden's Caucus. So having said that, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence with respect to the Ontario health teams? Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Moffat, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the May 17th, 2021 correspondence from the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, requesting that leadership of all Ontario health teams include representation from each county or region within their catchment area.
All in favor? That's carried. Councillor DeVolen, anything from Joint Social and Housing Services?
We meet on a quarterly basis and actually meet next week.
Okay, we look forward to hearing anything new and exciting after that meeting. I don't believe there's anything under professional recruitment. And I'm not sure if there's anything from the library board. Anybody wants to bring forward? Councillor Roberts.
Just to note that one of our goals was to update our strategic plan, which has been behind. And so that we now there's a strategic planning subcommittee, and actually a doodle poll just went out. So to answer that for any of the county councillors who are library board members, to do a full day strategic planning session in September. So it's great to get that ball rolling, that's all.
Yeah, I must say our interim CAO is really managing the helm very well. Okay, again, next is the Land Division Committee report. Is someone going to present that, or are we just going to receive it?
My hope was you would just receive it.
Well, I think we can do that, unless anybody's got any questions, any trick questions that we can put to Mike. That's bad. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Shell, Councillor Moffat, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the May 26, 2021 staff report on land division activity be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Under external boards and agencies, anything to report on Ontario Good Roads, Mr. President?
Yes, thank you. I am having internet problems here today for some reason, but you guys are breaking up. Am I fairly clear right now?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. OGRA is undergoing a rebrand, which is kind of exciting for me. Staff have been very excited to reveal our new look in the upcoming months. Part of that rebrand has been the return to basics for us. Staff and the board are really focused on being able to connect the municipalities and keep and help them with their solutions and the bigger challenges in transportation and infrastructure. Our education and training is continuing online. The Guelph Road School is taking place next week. While numbers are down from our in-person gatherings, the number of registrations continue to surpass our budgeted. But students have been coming. It's interesting that we are getting students coming from other municipalities and say mainly in the north that normally wouldn't get to school if it wasn't online courses. A number of policy initiatives continue to make headway, and with the folks at Queen's Park. A new road safety bill that's Moving Ontario More Safety Act 2021 was introduced by the Minister of Transportation. OGRA was involved with shaping some of the aspects of the bill. We will continue to make sure that roads and bridges and municipalities are able to manage their liability as a result. We're working and planning on our conference. We're hoping that we are going to have it in person, but that just remains to be seen.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Burton? Then Councillor DeVolen, do you have anything that you'd like to bring us up to date on from Yearend?
Well, kind of three prongs. The first part is with the existing wireless project that we have, the nuts and bolts of actual new additions to existing towers and the process for locating new ones is going forward. And exciting things, I think that there'll be levels of service increase before the calendar year's out that we'll see across all of Eastern Ontario, including Haliburton County, which is very exciting. The second part that is the warden has mentioned multiple times with respect to the Warden's Caucus is the push for the gig to home. And certainly if this can happen before the current project that we have, there's definitely some synergies. There's been lots of lobbying to both levels of government, and we continue to hope that we're successful, or at a minimum, given how many different initiatives there are provincially and federally, that both levels of government would tip their hands and tell us what they're doing, because we can plan around that. And thirdly, kind of a forgotten dimension, but when Yearend was created in 2017, when I was warden, there was a for-profit arm, ECS, was created. And the notion was that we could take advantage of some opportunities, increase the pool of knowledge that exists with respect to Yearend, and that it would generate profits that could feed back into Yearend, so that the municipal contributions may not be as sizable, or maybe someday, even if we're really successful, not necessary at all with any connectivity and communications initiatives going forward. That's in early stages, and we'll come back to the Yearend board and the Warden's Caucus as we go forward. But there's obviously, in the years and decades to come, we'll never be done this. Connectivity projects, new technologies, everything from the ones that are before us and lower orbit that seems to be in the news a lot. And we've been, there's been a sprinkling of folks within the county that have been able to take advantage of that, is to look at any of those things. So exciting days, not fast enough, but things continue to be exciting and moving forward. And I'm enjoying it. I'm a techie junkie, living in an exciting techie time.
I think we probably all agree that we've got the best guy we can have on the Yearend board. given your level of knowledge and enthusiasm. Councillor Kennedy, you've got a question?
Just to follow up, Councillor DeVolen, I was fortunate enough to attend North Frontenac's latest expansion on the Lake Kashagawigamog chain. They unveiled the new tower here at Silver Beach, and if it's indicative of what's going to happen around the lake, it's not intrusive at all. It's not much higher than a regular TV tower. They're installing over 5 kilometers of fiber to home, and as well hoping to connect up to 500 homes and cottages on the Kashagawigamog chain through a network of towers. So very exciting news, and North Frontenac is investing $1 million with their partners of the province and the feds. So exciting news and the first sort of boots on the ground. So congratulations, Councillor DeBolen, on helping push this initiative forward, and looking forward to greater things.
Well, and just Councillor Kennedy, you speak to the diversity of opportunities that are there. You know, the Yearend project that put fiber to municipal assets, and if you remember back to the conversation of the day, that vertebrae, smaller firms like North Frontenac, we have them in the villages of Haliburton, Minden, and both with those that tie into government programs and those just as an expansion of their private business that they do. There's lots of exciting stuff that's going to be coming forward. And you know, the one that you see there in Dysart that's in your neighborhood, that's the first of many to come, and not restricted to any particular geographic area. And they're hungry, and I would say that any opportunity they have to extend their reach, they will capitalize on. And the good thing that I would say to the people of the county, you know, when they originally had their business plan, I think the take rate for the math to work was somewhere around 50%. As costs have come down, but also the take rate, I don't know if it's to 70% yet, but it's above what their expectations were. And again, that helps fuel, and it isn't just North Frontenac. We have some other smaller players here that are similarly as excited to do some things. And as you've heard me say before, we need them all until everybody's connected within the county.
Any other questions for Councillor DeVolen? Well, thanks. We look forward to some more exciting advice or news. So nothing under Indigenous Affairs. Under other business, we've got the meeting calendar. Are there any errors or omissions with respect to that? Councillor DeVolen and
Just
Councillor
back to
Schell.
Poverty Reduction Roundtable. We haven't met since we last met as a council, the roundtable, but just the change that we have this year of the meeting that we had last month, I guess it was. Anyways, they'll be regularly reporting to us, and I'll comment and field questions when that actual formal reporting comes to us. Okay, just to remind everybody of that.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry I missed that. Any errors or omissions on the meeting calendar? Councillor Schell.
It's something really minor, but at Minden Hills Council, we're changing from committee of the whole to 2 council meetings a month. So it just would be Minden Hills Council rather than Minden Hills COTW, but minor, but just something
But important. Okay, thank you for that. Under other business, we have just another for discussion item about whether or not anybody feels that there's any further need for delegations at AMO. Hearing none. I guess there's no resolution required there. I guess that concludes our open session for the day. So could I have a mover and a seconder to move into closed? And we'll take, I think we'll adjourn until 10:30. Councillor Rial and Councillor Burton. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Rial, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council enter into closed session as per section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended for the following reasons. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we will see you all at 10:30.
And we're back live, Warden Danielson.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the bylaw to authorize an agreement with Fidelity Engineering. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor DeVolen, Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that bylaw 4051, being a bylaw to authorize an agreement with Fidelity Engineering and Construction Incorporated for the replacement of the Fishtail Lake culvert, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of motions? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillor Moffat and Councillor Shell.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that bylaw 4052, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the May 26, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? Thank you, that's carried. And finally, could I have a mover and a seconder for adjournment? Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Shell. Thank you. Did you have a question, Cease? Okay.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that the May 26, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll see you all at 1 o'clock.